mean, you said it seems that Pakistan doesn't want him. And so even if it was possible to deport him, then the question would be where he would go to and what would happen. I mean, you can't just sort of put him on an aircraft and send him to Pakistan. If the Pakistanis won't allow him into the country, they'll just say, well, we're not letting him off the aircraft and you've got to take him back again.
Andy Burnham isn't quite Prime Minister yet, but what he says is becoming more and more significant as he prepares to take power. He's called for the Cabinet to review all possible options to deport the ringleader of the Rochdale Grooming gang, who is set to be released today. Shabir Ahmed was a dual British-Pakistani national. He was stripped of his British citizenship and he renounced his Pakistani citizenship, but he can't be deported back to Pakistan under current laws. So, can anything realistically be done to change the status quo? I'm joined now by legal commentator Joshua Rozenberg. Good morning.
Good morning, Kate.
In this case, or we can talk more broadly if you're more comfortable doing so, what is stopping the UK government from deporting criminals like Mr. Ahmed?
It's the Immigration Act 1971. Now, he's not a British citizen, so in principle he's liable to deportation if the Home Secretary deems that to be conducive to the public good, if she thinks that's the right thing to do. There would also have been the possibility, when he was convicted of these terrible crimes some 14 years ago, of the trial judge recommending him for deportation. That didn't happen. The reason why that didn't happen, and the reason why the Home Secretary is unable to deport him under the Immigration Act, is that the Act created exceptions for Commonwealth citizens who were ordinarily resident in the United Kingdom when that Act came into force at the beginning of 1973, and that appears to apply to Shabir Ahmed. So because of these exceptions which were created for people who were nationals of Commonwealth countries, they are not liable to deportation as the original section said, under the basis that it's not conducive to the public good, and they're not liable to an order from the court at the time of their conviction.
So is there anything that could be done, or any area of law that could be changed to change the outcome here? Because the MP for the area, Paul Waugh, has suggested looking again at the Citizenship Act. Would that make any difference here?
I don't think so, because if you're going to decide that he wasn't a Commonwealth citizen back at the time that he was convicted, or the time that it was appropriate to consider whether he was not conducive to the public good, then you are obviously going against a principle, which is to punish him more harshly for an offence that he was sentenced to when he was convicted and sent to prison. And the general principle is you don't change the criminal law so that somebody is guilty of an offence or punishable more harshly after they've committed the crime, and for good measure, that is contrary to Article 7 of the Human Rights Convention.
So if the UK government recognises it can't do anything legally, could it come to some arrangement with Pakistan if the two countries were to agree to remove him, or would that be challenged too?
I'm sure he would challenge that, and I think that is an important point. I mean, you said it seems that Pakistan doesn't want him, and so even if it was possible to deport him, then the question would be where he would go to and what would happen. I mean, you can't just sort of put him on an aircraft and send him to Pakistan. If the Pakistanis won't allow him into the country, they'll just say, well, we're not letting him off the aircraft and you've got to take him back again. So there is that practical point as well. All in all, I think it is very tricky. You've also got to consider what would happen if you changed the law to apply to him. Would it apply to every other Commonwealth citizen? There must be plenty, or at least some, because this was some time ago when the law was changed. And do you want to single him out? Do you want to change the law retrospectively to apply to others in this position? It is quite a tricky question for the judges, and the government doesn't seem to be suggesting that there's anything very obvious to do.
Well, it sounds like that the reality is that there is nothing that can be done here, and I'm sure that will be frustrating for MPs and also Andy Burnham, who's posted, as we said at the start, that he would like to see this man deported. Joshua, while we have you, there's also been a case in the media recently, the rape of a teenage girl, and the judge in that case is deemed to have made some errors which let off those convicted with unduly lenient sentences, or at least that's the accusation. What's going on here, and what might we see as a result of looking again at this case?
That is indeed an allegation. The case was decided quite recently, and immediately afterwards the Attorney General, Lord Hermer KC, decided that the sentences passed by the judge on two teenage boys, now 15, were unduly lenient. That was his decision, and if he considers a case to be unduly lenient and it falls within the scheme laid down by Parliament, he can refer it to the Court of Appeal. There was a hearing yesterday in front of the Lady Chief Justice, Baroness Carr, sitting with two other judges, and they are expected to give judgment this afternoon on whether they have concluded that the sentence was unduly lenient. Sentences in these cases were unduly lenient, and if so, whether they should be increased.
Yeah, we'll keep an eye out for that this afternoon. Joshua, thank you very much. Great to have you.
Thank you.
That is legal commentator Joshua Rozenberg.
I thought it was so interesting, as you said, Kate, that Andy Burnham tweeted about that case, because he, as you say, he's been relatively careful about not getting too involved.
Yeah.
But what struck me also was he sounded just like any other politician when he did it. Something must be done, all options must be on the table, whereas actually there aren't any options, probably. It's just an interesting perspective for me, because he's going to be seen as this guy who's going to come in and change things, come in and do things differently. To me, he sounded very much like any politician when he did this.
That's really interesting you say that, because that's not what I took from that message, actually. I kind of took the opposite from what Andy Burnham had posted, which was that it didn't feel like a normal politician. Normally, leaders of parties, especially prime ministers, are really reluctant to put anything out in public unless they think they can achieve it. They really don't want to comment. For example, in this case, where, as Joshua Rozenberg was saying, it looks very difficult to legally deport this person. It's usually, in those instances, prime ministers would be hesitant to say they wanted to see them deported because they know that they're not going to be able to achieve that. So it would be a failure, basically. So I found it interesting that Andy Burnham did post that and said all options are on the table, even though most legal commentators will tell you it looks really hard to remove him.
But politicians, in my experience, when they can't do something, have to be seen to be looking like they're trying to do something. And all options on the table is one of the classic British politician cliches, where you're basically saying we can't do anything but we want to see like we try. And that to me felt like he wants to come in as an agent of change. That to me sounds like a very political thing, but it's interesting that you think the opposite of that.
Yeah, I took it differently. Also, there's not funny really, but there's an article I think in the paper today about how they got AI to replicate politicians' answers on Question Time. Yeah. And people felt that AI was actually more likeable and human than politicians' answers, but Andy Burnham bucks that trend. That's
interesting. Well, we know, don't we, coming on this programme, it will happen today, it'll happen tomorrow. Let me be clear, always leads to obfuscation. We know the rhythms of how people speak. One of the great, I think, misconceptions about some AI is that people say, AI can't reproduce human messiness. But whenever they've done tests of this, AI is really good at reproducing human messiness, better than humans are. So the idea that AI can't do art, whenever they've tested that, whenever they've shown people art performed by AI and performed by humans, people have always preferred the AI art.
Well, apart from when they gave AI the responsibility to run a radio station.
And then had a nervous breakdown.
We've just got to cling to too much.
We've just got to cling to that, haven't we? We can cling to that for at least another couple of days.
It couldn't do it. Shipley is a British writer, criminologist and prison reform campaigner. He writes on crime and justice for The Spectator. He also served time in prison himself. Good morning.
Morning.
Now, we know that Shabir Ahmed will be released today, unless obviously something changes at the last minute. He's served his sentence. So is it not right that he should be released on licence now at this point?
I mean, it's in accordance with the rules. I would suggest that a system which has made him serve less than 6 months for each of the 30 counts of child rape is wrong. You know, reasonably, we should not think that is an appropriate level of sentence or punishment. But he is to be released, and I think the question now is what happens. And people rightly expect that he would be deported. You know, if you hear what his victims say, they still live in terror, and they are afraid that this man is going to be out, and that he might use his influence to have them targeted or threatened in some way. You know, these are real fears, and these crimes don't end in many ways for the victims of child rape. You know, they carry these wounds with them for their whole lives, and I think that's part of the great evil. The question is, of course, the law currently says we can't deport him, and what I think therefore has to happen is a serious conversation about how the law needs to be changed.
And is it possible, in your view, because Joshua Rozenberg responded to the MP for the area, Paul Wall, has suggested that the Citizenship Act could be looked at again, and that might be a way of ensuring that we could deport him. Rozenberg was suggesting that looks very difficult, and it could well be challenged, and Pakistan may not agree to take him back anyway, even if we legally could. Is there a way that you could see this happening in reality?
Yeah, I think we often make the mistake of thinking that the law is geography or weather. It's something that just exists and we have to operate with it. The reality in our system, in our constitution, is that Parliament is absolutely supreme and sovereign, and Parliament can do what it wants. If Parliament wants to write and enact the Deportation of Shabir Ahmed Act 2026, that act says that no other law applies to it or constrain it, that happens. And I think, you know, we've got Andy Burnham coming out and making these comments. The Labour Greater Manchester mayoral candidate has actually said she wants them deported as well. This can happen. It's just about whether our Parliament and our government have the will to pass legislation.
Do you think it would be widely supported if that were the way the government chose to go?
I mean, I think a better approach would be to change the law more generally. But yes, I think it would be a very popular act. It would be hard to see. I'm sure there would be some people who would say that, you know, it's unjust to do it in this way. But actually, this is a reasonable goal. The point of law is a set of tools. And if the tools no longer function the way we want, or we need them to serve different purposes, or they aren't achieving the goals we desire, of course we change the law.
But we'd still be stuck, wouldn't we, with the Pakistan government's response? I mean, there have been some talks about trying to deport other criminals to Pakistan, and a little bit of progress made in the relationship between, you know, our country and Pakistan, but it hasn't actually resulted in any successful deportations. If they say no, it doesn't happen.
Yeah, and then it comes down to a negotiation between states, doesn't it? I mean, we could, for example, seek to block remittances back to Pakistan, which are substantial from this country. We could restrict visa issuance to Pakistanis. There are serious diplomatic tools we could use. And equally, we could say that while we're trying to do this, we will just detain Shabir Ahmed until we can reach an accord. These are all things we can do. We are only bound by our willingness to legislate, by Parliament's willingness to legislate, our willingness to act.
David, just finally, some of the victims, in my understanding, found out about his release today online or on social media. I mean, how has that been allowed to happen? Because obviously they may well be living in the area. There are restrictions on his movement to an extent, but as you say, that there is a fear that he could use other people to get to them. I mean, how is it that they were not told beforehand?
This actually happens quite often. It's really, really sad and enraging. In theory, probation are supposed to let victims of a crime know when someone's going to be released. This often doesn't happen in a very coordinated way. And I think, you know, it must be awful for every single one of his victims to know that he's being released anyway. But to find out, you know, because you see it in the news, must be a horrendous shock. And yeah, I think the probation service clearly need to be better at letting victims know way ahead of time about potential releases of people who've hurt them. David, thank you very much for joining us on the programme this morning. That is David Shipley, a British writer, an expert on prison reform. And interestingly, many of your responses to this, alongside questions about deportation, are if we think this guy is still dangerous, why we're not just keeping him in prison. But I suppose that's a limitation of the sentencing regime. I mean, he was sentenced, he was given a long time in jail.
19 years, but he's out in 14.
Yeah.
But that's very standard. And in fact, actually, in order to get people out of the prisons, they've let people out a lot earlier than that, haven't they? That's
they have.
Both governments of both parties have done that. It's a funny thing, you get 19 years and you're out in 14, and as you say, that's 6 months for every offence. That doesn't feel strong enough, does it? I wonder whether, I think it's such a good point, because a lot of ministers will come on this programme, politicians say, we can just send people back where they come from. But as you rightly say, if Pakistan say we don't want them, or Afghanistan say we don't want them, You can then have a negotiation with that country, but there's no guarantee that negotiation will actually function. You can't literally fly someone in, leave them on the tarmac and fly out again. However much you'll hear from some politicians that's what they want to do, that is not possible, is it?
No, it's not possible. And the negotiations with Pakistan have been going on for a number of years now. I mean, this is not a new issue. This was something that Theresa May, when she was in government, was fighting, that subsequent ministers have been arguing for. This deportation question, I remember reporting it when I worked in newspapers. It's not new, but no government has been able to find a way successfully to remove this specific set of criminals, let alone the kind of broader question about criminals more generally. Labour has done quite a lot to step up deportations to countries that are willing to take them.
Yeah.
But it's countries where they are not willing to, and where the question of citizenship, these guys in this grooming gang, they renounced their citizenship of Pakistan in order to avoid being removed, to make it more difficult.
We'll keep reporting on this case and we'll see where it takes us. It's 8:18.